everyone, welcome to Unchained, your no-hype resource for all things crypto. I'm your host, Laura Shin. In case you haven't heard, I have another crypto podcast called Unconfirmed. It's shorter, newsier, and comes out Fridays. If you haven't yet, go subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts. Also, find out what I think are the top stories in crypto by signing up for my weekly newsletter at unchainedpodcast.com.
Kraken is the best exchange in the world for buying and selling digital assets. It has the tightest security, deep liquidity, and a great fee structure with no minimum or hidden fees. Whether you're looking for a simple fiat on-ramp or futures trading, Kraken is the place for you. CipherTrace cutting-edge cryptocurrency intelligence powers anti-money laundering, blockchain analytics, and threat intel. Leading exchanges, virtual currency businesses, banks, and regulators themselves use CipherTrace to comply with regulation and to monitor compliance.
Are you passionate about blockchain but fall short on the technical skills to build and deploy blockchain applications? Then check out SimbaChain, the smart contract as a service blockchain simplification layer on simbachain.com, and their new enterprise offering on the Microsoft Azure Marketplace. My guest today is Olga Feldmeier, CEO of Smart Valor. Welcome, Olga.
Hello, Lara. Nice to be here.
You have a really interesting personal story that I think gives some insight into the downsides of centralization or perhaps the power of decentralization. So can you tell us about how you grew up in Ukraine and then came to leave and live in the West?
Sure. Laura, I had a very interesting life. I was actually born in Western Ukraine, being actually, mixture of Russian, Polish, Ukrainian, and Jewish blood. And as I was a teenager, the Soviet Union collapsed. And with that, Ukraine, that is, was and still is quite dependent on Russia in terms of economic relationships. Well, Ukraine was in very bad condition. And to save the country, what they started to do is basically to print money. So we used to have a hyperinflation of 10,000% per year, was down to 5,000% for, I think, around 5 years. So in that time, it's really pretty crazy. All the people that work for the state, they got their salaries paid like much later, 6-9 months. The same for my mother, who was a piano player. So by the time we got, her salary 6 months later, the monthly salary was enough to buy a piece of bread, right? So, we were carrying these bags full of paper money to the next shop to get rid of it, right? So, and all of that, it was a very tough time. You basically are watching, the collapse of the state, right? Nothing is working. There is no electricity. People are dying on the street. Nobody's, bringing them away. They're there for the days, right? And you watch all of this and you think like, oh my goodness, how could this happen? That was the moment for me I started to study economics and macroeconomics to macroeconomics to understand how could this happen. And ever since, I was pretty much big fan of, basically, it was always very fascinating to me, economy and finance and how this works. So I received a scholarship from German government and started to study in Germany. So that's, a very, very kind of the beginning of the story. But this beginning of the story gave me also quite a solid view on, why Bitcoin is needed and why I'm in this place now.
And one other detail of this story that I love is that you didn't even know any German and you heard that they were giving out scholarships. So then you just crammed like at the last minute to try to, pass these exams. I think you said it was something like 9 months that you had.
Yeah. Wow. That's very, intimate part of the story. That's true. And, I learned that if you want something like really bad, then there's nothing that can stop you. Right. I mean, there were all the other students that had German for the last 10 years. And I had no clue, right? And I said, no, I'm going to make it. I'm going to learn German for this exam, right? And for 9 months, but then I couldn't talk even to people. I was because I learned all this stuff by heart, right? The macroeconomy book and all of this stuff. So I wasn't able to talk. I'm like, don't talk to me because I'm going to forget, how this sounds, what central bank is doing against inflation, stuff like this. So totally nuts. But you see, this worked out. Ukraine was receiving back then 3 scholarships for the whole country, right? And I got one of those top 3 scholarships. It's amazing, right?
It is amazing.
And yeah, well, but Laura, the rest of my professional life, like I studied in Germany, I finished university in Munich. But then, because you come from the other country and you speak with your funny accent, what you do is your first professional years, you're trying to prove everybody and yourself that you're as good as them, right? So I studied really hard. I was one of the best students. I, applied to all the top companies, investment banks, BCG, McKinsey. I received offers from all of them. And somehow I then decided to go to BCG, because BCG was, Boston Consulting Group, was a very diverse place. There were women, not like in investment banking. There were more women. There were more people with diverse backgrounds. And that was just the right place to start for me. I did that for 5 years, all in financial services, working on big strategies for big banks, Deutsche Bank, like almost all European banks. Yeah, and at some point I said, wow, this is good to be advisor, but how it is to be a banker? So I switched to Barclays Capital, done that for several years in London, and then I decided to learn another side of banking, which was wealth management. So I joined UBS here in Zurich, in Switzerland, in their headquarters as a head of sales for Central and Eastern European region in wealth management. So that was also quite a phase.
Yeah, and your next stop after that was Xapo. So how did you get into Bitcoin? Did you know about Bitcoin before Xapo?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I tried hard to understand it. And initially I didn't get it. I was reading and here an economist wrote about it. I was like, no, I'm not getting this. How is this just a code? What's the value behind it?
And did you hear about it from The Economist, or how did you hear about it?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow.
So that was because I was a very passionate reader of Economist for many years. So, but basically then I think it was just a great timing because, by the time I kind of realized I'm fine, I made my career in banking. I'm as good as everybody else and maybe even better. I don't need to, for the first time in my life, I really asked myself, what do I want to do? And then by that time, Bitcoin, kind of appeared for at least people like me, from banking. And by that time, I was lucky enough to meet Vences Cazares, who was a founder of Xapo. And it was actually very, we met here in Switzerland. It was I think it was one of his first visits here, beginning of 2015.
And that was because you had reached out to him, right?
Yes, exactly. I knew some guys here in Switzerland, some investors, and I said, I'm actually quite, tired of banking. I don't see the vision is not there for me. I don't know why I'm wasting my time there. So, and I want to do something really exciting. I actually like Bitcoin, and they told me, there is Vences, he's in San Francisco. And then it's funny, I wrote him a letter. Just letter on their Security and Exchange Commission registration at a registered address. And I thought and everybody said oh, forget it. You write a letter, nobody will ever come back to you.
Not an email.
Yeah, exactly. And, Laura, it's funny, 3 days later, I had an email from him and he was like, Olga, let's meet next week. I'm in Switzerland. So it's with those things, there is a good timing and luck, but you also have to take a chance and take an action, right? And then both of them will meet and you're lucky, right? So it was beginning of 2015, right? So Xapo was founded in 2013. Basically, through the idea of Vences, he wanted to create this opportunity for people, for investors in Bitcoin to store their Bitcoins in a safe way and, also help people around the world to have more financial freedom. But the problem was they built the tech, But the problem was that back then in 2015, there wasn't even BitLicense in New York. Like there was literally nothing in terms of regulation. How do you deal with Bitcoin custody? Well, nobody knew that. And I think they hit quite some difficulties in US. So the idea was they will come to Switzerland and we'll try to get licensed here. And, for me, it was very interesting also meeting with Vance's first time. We were sitting here on the lake, looking at the lake. He told me his Argentinian story, how they were poor, just living from the ships, the farm. And his story and my story was actually, pretty much the same, with the only difference that it was Argentina or Ukraine. But we all suffered, from this collapsing state, from defaults, from hyperinflation. And all of this experience filled both of us with a vision that now they have the technology to change this, to protect us, to protect the people. And basically, to give more empowerment and basically, improve this balance of power between people and state, right? And give people something how they can say no. So that was a very visionary first meeting, and that I think this changed my life pretty much.
And was that actually also the reason when you were saying that you originally tried to understand Bitcoin after reading The Economist? Was it your personal experience that finally made you understand the potential in it?
Yeah, well, before that, I think my first small investment I made in 2013, I was reading and trying to understand. And for me, the event was basically, when Cyprian banks, there was, some banks went bankrupt, and there's a lot of banks. That was, in connection to Greece crisis in Greece. So some banks stopped to pay out money, and it was kind of like a little default situation there. And then you saw that Bitcoin went from 30, 40 to 70. And I thought like, wow, this is amazing. For the first time I see it, like, macroeconomic indicators or what happens in one country really has correlation with this digital currency. So imagine if things will get even worse. Imagine if European Union collapse or there is a war. So obviously this thing has a, chance to become a new kind of hedge. Right. So I bought my first Bitcoins back then. And then, of course, with Benzius and Xapo, I poured pretty much everything that I have in Bitcoin. Right. So, which actually, Laura helped me to start my own company, Smart Valor. Right. I was the first, one of the biggest investors in Smart Valor. How? Well, I would never earn that much money in banking, right? Working for banks. But that was my Bitcoin purchases from 2013. So I think I made some good choices back then.
Oh, interesting. All right. We're going to have to talk about that in a little bit. But first I wanted to ask, what was it like trying to work at a Bitcoin company in Switzerland in 2015? Like now it's known as, Crypto Valley and whatever, Crypto Nation. But back then, what was it like?
Well, I was the only one here in Switzerland, and there were, I guess, like 3 other companies, which all had a staff between 2 to 5 people, right? So the whole Crypto Valley was basically, some 10, 20 people. And we didn't have any, place to meet or any association, nothing. You would just know them. And some guys just started, meet up. So we sometimes met, just for beer here in Zug, but there was nothing, and...
Well, Ethereum was there, right? Was that kind of like
They arrived 2014? Yes, exactly. Oh, yes, you're right. Of course, Vitalik was here just across the street from where we sit now. He used to rent this little house, and they were putting mattresses and everything on the floor, so they were sleeping and working there and everything, right? So that's true, yes. Ethereum, Bitcoin Swiss, Monetas, and Xapo, we were the first 4 companies, so to say, right?
And wait. I thought, so earlier in the conversation, you said something like here in Zurich, but then just now you said right across the street. So are you in Zug right now?
Oh, Laura, this is all so small and so close here. So now our office of Smart Velour is in Zug. Zug is kind of
Okay.
like has this name of Crypto Valley because it looks like a valley. It has a lake, right? But
Right.
if you jump on the train, you're just in 20 minutes in Zurich. So for me, Zurich and Zug is the same, right? So
Uh.
no, Zurich is a little bit further down, right? So Zurich is the biggest city in Switzerland, and this is where all the banks are. They have their headquarters there.
Right. Okay. So why don't let's talk about what you did at Zappo.
Well, my major mission was help Zappo to get licensed here in Switzerland, right? Because you see, back then we had like the biggest, risk to survival of the company was that we have no banking partners, right? And as you probably know, every relationship with a bank starts with, well, what is your status? What do you do? How are you licensed? And so on. So us, being not licensed at all, being basically, a holding in Hong Kong and, like having no regulatory status as a, financial institution. That was very difficult to obtain and keep banking relationships. So obviously we needed to get licensed, and initially we thought, well, it doesn't matter, we will go any lengths. We're happy to do even banking license, whatever. But then we figured out that banking license, especially here in Switzerland, comes at a great cost. You have minimal capital requirements of 10 million. Plus you need to employ around 100 people. You have super high cost to run the bank, right? And this a year advance before you even get, permission to operate. So all of this actually was, not appropriate for our business model. And we decided to try to get regulated as money transmitter or like, payment institution, but something that is actually suitable for custodian. So our goal was actually to be able to operate as a regulated financial institution without banking license. And exactly that was a problem. Because you see, FINMA is a Swiss financial regulatory authority. Back then looked at our business. You can imagine we were basically one of the first Bitcoin businesses they ever heard about, right? And they looked at the custody solution and they said, well, look, guys, if you take it conservatively, then basically you're taking money from investors, you hold it. So it's kind of like public deposit taking activity, right? So in a very conservative case, you should still get a banking license. We were like, oh no, like we don't want the banking license. This is too much work, too much capital, and so on and so on. And they said, well, then, look for another solution. So it was kind of like a dead end, and that after 1 year of work on it, all the money spent on lawyers, right? All of the work, Vance's that they were regularly here. It was quite frustrating, that there is that end. And why is that? Like looking back, I actually understand because, back then, this institution did not have such a broad, understanding of this technology. And of course, what you know and what you hear that, this is the currency that is used, for drugs purchases in dark net, like all of these bad, things. Whereas actually Switzerland is, taken way big step away from this, banking secrecy and from this money laundering, from all those bad things that happened in the past, right? And Switzerland is targeting to position itself as an absolutely clean jurisdiction with the toughest KYC and AML. And then, for them to make a step into Bitcoin, you can imagine this is, quite, would be quite a change, right? Back then, right?
Right. Off brand.
Exactly. So, and actually I was very disappointed. And Francis said, like, so this is it. We live in Switzerland. Like, this is all waste of the time. And then I think I was just very lucky. I met some people that, knew some other people, and they told me, well, look, in the Swiss parliament, there is this group, of parliamentary members that is called Digital Sustainability, and they kind of they promote innovation in technology in financial services and technology space. You should talk to them. And then I got connected to those parliament members. They invited me to Bern. I went to Bern. Bern is a formal capital of Switzerland. And then I told them, look, guys, it's a great company. It's Silicon Valley company. We got 40 million seed funding from top investors. We're just basically building this technology to store securely the digital currency, right? And we want to be licensed. And you guys, look, here's, banking secrecy was abandoned 2008. Wealth management, your most important industry in banking, is not growing, right? This is kind of it's not, the future of financial services. You need innovation. Everybody knows this. Everybody says we need innovation. Blockchain is the innovation. This is the technology, right? And of course, they're all very smart people. So they heard this and they said, well, Olga, we're going to help you. So then one of these people then submitted a motion to the parliament about the changing of the banking law that would change the definition of public deposit, so that, storing the private key to cryptocurrency addresses would not fall under category of public deposit taking activity, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, that's great. So Parliament is voting about it. And it's really funny, the Parliament actually voted no to this motion. So they let the motion fall down. But on the other side, all the conversations with FINMA moved forward, and they kind of they got it, right? They got the message, a lot of people really want this and we should look at it. And there is also, the FINMA is guided by a great guy, Mr. Branson. He's, British citizen, and he is very pro-innovation. And he actually told us, guys, I want to make it happen. Yes, it takes a while, but we will get there. And so another half a year later, so in total after 1.5 years, they finally allowed us to be regulated and operating out of Switzerland, not as a bank, but just as a financial intermediary, right? So member of self-regulatory organization, not even supervised by FINMA. But, in Switzerland, kind of financial supervision is delegated to some other self-regulatory authorities. So we have become the first financial intermediary, to provide Bitcoin custody. So that was a big news.
Yeah, and was the switch kind of, the rationale for the switch sort of predicated on this idea that, what's different is that you're not using the deposits. You're just sort of storing the Bitcoins. Is that what the distinction was?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So there is no interest payment on it. There is no other use. We're not lending it. We're not pledging it. We're not doing anything with it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel did you also help Xapo kind of get clients to store their Bitcoins in the vault? And if so, what was that like?
Well, of course, Laura, I did. I cannot provide, specific details, but of course, we were targeting large financial institutions here in Switzerland, and I was responsible for, establishing connection with them, bringing them to our vault, showing how the vault works. It was pretty amazing. It was basically, ex-military bunker in the middle of the mountain, right? In this Gotthard mountain, right? It's massive. It was actually the major Air Force military station that was built during the Cold War, and with massive security, could sustain 30 Hiroshima bombs. It's just security you cannot take. This is kind of like what you see in James Bond movies, right? And I used to bring there all the bankers and their commissions and their internal control, and all the people that try to understand, is this really safe? And normally they went away with a feeling, oh, it's super safe, right? And yes, we did it. We attracted some quite big clients here in Switzerland, those banks that then later issued the first certificates on Bitcoin, right? They did not offer
the first
Bitcoin directly to their certificates on Bitcoin.
Right.
Yeah. So
blanking on the names.
When people basically buy a note at the bank, and
like the coin shares
holds a Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that was, and I think I was actually very happy several weeks ago I heard that Xapo, well, exactly this business, institutional, jointly, I guess, with a Swiss entity, was sold to Coinbase for 50 million.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me personally, of course, I'm a shareholder of Xapo, right? But for me personally, it was kind of like my first little, exit in a way, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so speaking of kind of, I guess, investments, you mentioned earlier that your early Bitcoin purchases helped you found Smart Valor. That's how you funded the founding of that company. It's a little bit different from some of the others in the space who took their holdings into investing in ICOs. But so why don't you tell people what it is that Smart Valor does?
Yes. So Smart Valor was founded, after I left Xapo and basically understood, oh my goodness, wow, I can pull this off. I could, make the mission impossible possible. I received this license. I was like, wow, now let's do something really difficult. Let's do security tokens, right? And basically, we founded early 2017 here in Switzerland, in Zug, with a vision to build the first ever security token marketplace exchange for alternative investments. With a vision, basically, to give people all around the world an easy access to exclusive investment opportunities that you would otherwise only get access if you're a client of UBS and super rich, right? You remember my background, I worked for UBS, right? I know that world, right? You're rich, you're 5 million plus, there is a red carpet for you, your assets are onboarded in Switzerland, it's super safe, you get all the exclusive offers, you can invest in private equity, your return is 15% plus. And to me, Laura, I remember this life in Ukraine, right? Where if people have bank account, well, this is great, but there is no investment opportunities, there is capital control, right? You can't do anything without it. They devalue your currency. You can't even change it into dollar. Like, I remember this world, right? And to me, there was such a huge gap between what is there for rich people and what's there for the rest of us. I said, no, we're going to change this. Our mission is to give people access to great investment opportunity in stable jurisdiction, where there are people and organizations that are responsible for their money. And that is kind of like what's behind, the vision of creating this company.
Well, wait, so one question I have is, for security tokens, are there the same limitations on who can trade them? And if so, does that really expand access?
Yes. So that's a very good question. Of course, security tokens are securities, and they are traded very differently from currencies. And this is also, a little bit kind of what's behind our staged implementation roadmap. So yes, we started 2017, and we said, okay, there will be two phases. Phase one, we just launched an exchange, right? And this exchange, there are cryptocurrencies and utility tokens. And in the second stage, we will add security tokens. So this is actually what happened. Where do we stand right now? So we launched an exchange in July. We are licensed, as I did this for Xapo, as financial intermediary here in Switzerland. This time it didn't took me 1.5 years. It took me just 3 months, and we did it ourselves, no lawyers. I'm very proud of this. And we are also licensed in Liechtenstein as an exchange for currencies. So that's first stage. Now the exchange is running. It's amazing. I love it. People can buy currently just 3 cryptocurrencies. This is the first version, but you can pay with credit card. You can pay via bank wire. We are now adding deposit function. We are adding a lot of other cryptocurrencies. Next week, soon, we are adding the advanced trading view. So it's basically, the same as Kraken or Coinbase. It's a full-blown cryptocurrency exchange. This is the first stage for us. So we got the tech done, right? And now the second stage is coming with getting licensed for distribution and trading of security tokens. This one we expect early next year, definitely prior to the summer 2020.
All right, so we're going to talk more about the Smart Valor platform in a moment, but first a quick word from the sponsors who make this show possible. Today's episode is brought to you by SymbaChain. Do you have a blockchain idea that could benefit your organization, but are you not sure where to begin? Then go to SymbaChain.com. SymbaChain's API-based approach simplifies blockchain for developers and provides a simple web application that empowers business analysts, domain experts, managers, and executives to design their smart contracts. SymbaChain supports Ethereum, Quorum, Stellar, and many more to come. They turn business analysts into API designers and non-blockchain developers into blockchain developers. Check out SymbaChain.com to quickly build your blockchain application.
Will the world follow France and advocate banning privacy coins? Will government-backed stablecoins become the new fiat? Are distributed and peer-to-peer exchanges just a flash in the pan? The answer is maybe. Virtual currencies can flourish and create a new, private, and more versatile economy. But that grand vision can't happen without keeping crypto clean. And that requires support of governments and accountability for bad actors. Privacy-enhanced compliance using cryptographic controls has the potential to preserve anonymity without compromising legitimate investigations. CipherTrace is working on this vision of the future. Sign up to stay up to date on the Privacy-Enhanced Compliance Initiative and receive authoritative crypto AML reports quarterly. www.ciphertrace.com/keepcryptoclean. Today's episode is brought to you by Kraken. Kraken is the best exchange in the world for buying and selling digital assets. With all the recent exchange hacks and other troubles, you want to trade on an exchange you can trust. Kraken's focus on security is utterly amazing. Their liquidity is deep, and their fee structure is great, with no minimum or hidden fees. They even reward you for trading so you can make more trades for less. If you're a beginner, you will find an easy on-ramp from 5 fiat currencies. And if you're an advanced trader, you'll love their 5x margin and futures trading. To learn more, please go to Kraken.com. That's KRAKEN.com.
Back to my conversation with Olga Feldmeier of Smart Valor. So we were just talking about security tokens and about how your platform will enable the trading of them. What definition are you using? Is it one that was set up by Swiss regulators?
Well, Switzerland is actually a great place to be if you're in a crypto company and you're in cryptocurrency business. But Switzerland is actually not our only jurisdiction. So we are regulated and present in 2 countries, Switzerland and Liechtenstein. And Liechtenstein is, you get there just in 1 hour. It's the neighboring country. But Liechtenstein is a part of European Economic Zone, which gives you access to 30 European countries. So we have in Europe this so-called passporting system. So if you get a license in one country, you can passport it into 30 other European countries. So we are regulated currently in Switzerland, but we are applying in the process of application for so-called MTF, Multilateral Trading Facility. It's kind of equivalent to ATS in US. We're applying for this one in Liechtenstein. So for us, all the definitions of what is security and how this works are relevant for European Union, right? So in Switzerland, there is a certain definition, and in European Union, there is pretty much the same, right? So security is everything that gives you, a certain income stream and represents, ownership of certain financial product.
And what is the demand for trading security tokens? or just any kinds of tokens representing real world assets?
So I think the problem is not so much that there is no demand for security tokens, that people don't want to buy it. I think the problem is actually, that we are just in a very early stage, right? For this space to be successful, you need exchanges, a lot of them, which are easy to access. You need a lot of different assets on those exchanges, right? You need a minimal critical mass, right? And we're not yet there.
But just so I understand, like for some of those security tokens that you'll be offering, will anybody be able to trade them like across jurisdictions, or like how are you going to implement all the rules around who can trade them? Because I would imagine they would differ for each different token.
Exactly. So it's different by investment product, right? If you start with asset classes, of course, it's very simple to tokenize gold and sell gold to everybody. Gold is even tokenized, can be viewed as not a security, right? So that's super simple. It gets more complicated with shares of companies, right? With shares of companies, actually, there is nothing new. It's basically IPOs, right? So IPOs are, selling of new shares, right? And it's the same for STO. If it's a new security token offering, it needs to, to satisfy certain criteria. The company needs to be able, to prove that they have revenues, that they have audited statements, financial statements, that this is something that can be offered to public. And if all of those criteria are there, right? So then, yes, you can do IPO and you can offer it to public, to retail investors. Whereas, something that is super risky, like venture capital funds or private equity funds, they are, of course, subject to certain limitations. This is something that we call, accredited investors. So only people that can handle this risk and will not be damaged by this can have access to them.
So basically, Smart Valor will determine kind of what types of different tokens people can trade, and then just limit them based on what their status is. Okay.
Sure. Yeah. So it's not even, we will determine this. All of this is, we have here in Europe so-called MiFID 1 and now MiFID 2. This is like a super comprehensive regulatory framework, which is, targeted at protecting investors in all the different jurisdictions across Europe on the same basis. And MiFID is actually, regulating which type of investment is suitable for which type of investor. And we as a platform provider are responsible for offering the right product to the right people, right? So yes, there will be tokens that anybody can see. So you log in, and even if you're not accredited investor or you don't have experience with, dealing with derivatives or more risky assets, you will see them. For example, it can be real estate, it can be metals, it can be public stock of, certain companies that are doing IPO on our platform. But for other investments, which are like more risky, you will not see them. For this other part, you will need to be qualified as accredited investor.
And Smart Valor is actually the first crypto exchange in Switzerland, I believe. Why do you think there hasn't been an exchange thus far?
The first fully integrated exchange was custody and trading and brokerage, right? There were some other exchanges which are just, basically kind of like decentralized, some kind of DEX exchanges. Yes, you can buy it, but you cannot store your tokens there. The reason for that is actually that, FINMA is very, very restrictive and tough in how they treat custody and how they want this custody to operate. So they were very reluctant to enable exchanges here that provide their own custody. And this is for us actually also the reason that we operate from two countries, right? Because our custody solution is actually provided through our subsidiary in Liechtenstein, right? Which is, was a much easier process to register and run it out of the Liechtenstein. So we kind of like, we are licensed in both countries, and certain parts of our business is provided by different, companies in the holding structure, right? So we found a way how to basically make it work, but I would not say we are the first exchange in Switzerland. We're the first cryptocurrency exchange operated by a Swiss company out of Switzerland. This is our headquarters, but we are regulated in both countries, in Switzerland and in Liechtenstein.
And Smart Valor also uses a Swiss franc based stablecoin. Why do you have that? Like, is there a lot of demand for trading pairs in the Swiss franc?
Yeah, well, yes. So Swiss franc, not the stable coin for now. It's just fiat currency, Swiss franc. And yes, even with this one, there are no exchanges that offer Swiss franc trading pairs, right? It's funny, but it's the way it is. We wanted last year, we had plans to issue stable coin, and we looked at different implementation options. But basically, we put this for now a little bit on hold in a view of, negative interest rates. Maybe you have heard recently, even UBS said they're going to start in November, charge all clients -1% for storing, for basically deposit, right? So you imagine if you issue that coin, you actually already need to charge people this 1%, right? Because this is the money that you need to pay to central banks to deposit money. So it's actually, we thought that the time is not right yet, and the form how we will do it, we will do it a little bit later. So for now, it's just we have 4 different fiat currencies on our platform: euro, British pound, Swiss franc, and of course dollar. And for the time being, this is it. We will be looking how we list more stable coins. I'm very much interested in Korean won, in Chinese yen. So stable coins for this currency, they will be hugely valuable.
Yeah, Smart Valor decided to make Korea its second home. What do you mean by second home, and why did you choose Korea?
Well, first of all, we define ourselves as a global platform for global audience of investors. And if you look, like from perspective from here in Switzerland, Switzerland is the largest wealth management center, offshore banking wealth management center globally, right? We have 4 trillion assets being booked here on the Swiss bank accounts, right? It's actually quite a big amount. And if you look, where the wealth is coming from, so the source countries that are growing are basically in Asia, right? So it's China, it's different countries that are different in size, but it's always this, need for people to find a safe destination for their savings, right? And we were looking at Asia and thinking, well, where is this, where the wealth is going to come from on our platform? Well, Dallas, it's the same as for wealth management. So it's Hong Kong, it's Indonesia, it's China, but also South Korea. The special thing about South Korea is that South Korea is also one of the biggest countries in cryptocurrencies, right? Around 20% of population, people have some kind of cryptocurrency or token. It's amazing, right? And for us, it was the question like, where are we going to list our own currency? Japan is super tough, Binance we cannot afford. And then we got in conversation with some people in Korea, and that was a very good option. They were, in terms of compliance, at the level where we can, deal with it. So we, as a fully compliant financial intermediary in Switzerland, we cannot go to any exchange, So the final choice was put on Bitsum for the listing of Valor token.
How much would it cost to list it on Binance?
Well, you know what? I don't even know. But I think it was like crazy. Some people were speaking about 1 million, and then somebody came back with a reference of 400,000. But anyway, it's just, to me personally, this is not the amount of money that I think as a responsible CEO you would put into listing of your token on any exchange.
Right. So actually, this is The perfect segue to my next question, which was, I wanted to ask you, you have this extensive background in finance, as you outlined, working for BCG and doing consulting for all these banks, and then you worked at Barclays and UBS. So how would you compare what's happening in the crypto space with traditional financial markets?
Well, I think, if you look back, like, let's say 20 years, there was this time, or even 15 years, where it was all around online banking, and oh my goodness, you don't need to go to the bank. Now you can do it all online, and wow, what a freedom is that. So I think what people are experiencing now is that you don't even need banks, right? You can do it all out of your wallet. And we're just starting to realize what this means. I think we are kind of like in that age, right? But with a difference, Laura, is that it will have much more profound consequences for people's life and for societies, right? I think, what I'm particularly excited about is that, the same way as Bitcoin now established itself as a, digital gold, and, you can wire money, and there are so many payment options now with cryptocurrencies. And, the state cannot anymore say people, well, what, we want your money, so keep it home. You're not allowed to wire abroad, right? So this is, it doesn't hold true anymore. People can send money wherever they want, right? And I think what happened with Bitcoin, the exciting thing, the same will happen with investments, securities, opportunities to invest in other countries. So this whole notion of decentralized exchanges and security tokens, or any kind of tokens that represent some kind of value or participation, this is amazing, right? It's kind of like, it doesn't matter if governments want it or no, there is regulation or there is no regulation. It will just happen, right? There is no way to stop this.
That's kind of what I was asking you before. I mean, if the security token still carries the same restrictions with it, then how does it kind of democratize access? I don't understand that part.
Yeah. So look, I think, you see, it's just a huge space, right? And the space of, security tokens, it will have different niches, right? So we with Smart Valor, we are targeting this regulated, compliant, being an exchange, right? In accordance with all the laws, here in Europe. So this is kind of like our niche, right? But there will be other players, that are completely out of nowhere. Nobody knows who runs them. Nobody knows where those people are. It's decentralized exchanges, right? I send you Apple share, you send it back to me, and there is no way any government can stop it, right? And for people who has appetite for that, it's like, some people go to Binance, some people go to only Coinbase, some people go to some like super shady exchanges, right? and to some investors it does matter, to some investors it doesn't matter, right? So there will be also within security tokens, there will be their segments, right? And in countries like, there will be certainly some countries where we will not be able to offer our services officially, right? And there will be other platforms that will serve those countries, right? I'm speaking about Iran, sanctioned countries, like, countries with very tough security regulations. There are all those cases, and that business will go to other platforms. Look what Abra is doing, right? They're basically replicating, stocks, right? So equity in public companies, and anybody can access it from so many countries. Right. Mm-hmm. I love it. It's a great vision. Is it our business? No. Our business is this regulated space, right? But even within that space, even if it's security, Laura, there are big opportunities for innovation in this space. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. So if you think about actually this multilateral trading facility, so what is this? It's basically, self-regulatory trading venue for securities. It was created around 10 years ago. It's relatively new license. And why? Because, before that, all the exchanges, they were all local. So there is a French exchange, there is a London exchange, there's German Deutsche Börse, and they all pull like their national securities. So they are all very small markets, only German, only French. And the idea was to create this, pan-European market. So for this, MTF was created that, any shares of any companies issued in any 30 European countries can be traded on those exchanges. And what happened? Yes, then those new platform trading venues came to life and they become bigger than national exchanges, right? So this is great, right? We're going to just take this regulation and apply this for, shares of the companies securitized on the blockchain. Will it be better? I believe it will be much, much better. Better liquidity, cheaper infrastructure, simpler handling of clearing and settlement, right? So all of those exchanges, this is one part, technical. But the other part is that there is also amazing new space of new investment opportunities, right? I'm super excited about the whole passion investment space, right? Films, music, art, all the stuff that was never securitized, right? Now we have chance to tokenize it, securitize it, and sell it into fractional ownership to a lot of people and make it even tradable. It doesn't have to be tradable every day. There can be auctions, there can be weekly trade. There's so many options, to do that.
But for something like that, like with a physical item, like an artwork, do you mean like a digital artwork? Because
anything.
Otherwise,
yeah.
Well, but then who would take possession? So let's say we have fractional ownership of the Mona Lisa. I'm just making this up. Then who keeps possession of it?
Museum. It's in the same place. But you can own it, like 1/1,000,000th of it, and you can give it to your daughter as a present. And of course, there will be certain value increase over time with Mona Lisa, if you want it. But imagine, Laura, for the first time, you would be able to hold a super diversified portfolio of super different assets, even if you have just 10,000. It's not possible today. If you come to me like 5 years ago at UBS, I would tell you, well, bring 5 million, otherwise we are not talking about diversification. It's not possible, right? Because stakes are so high. You want private equity? Well, for a good one, please bring at least 500,000, right? So all of this, like for average people, the access and diversification is very limited, right? And this is what tokenization is changing. You can have anything in a very small fractional ownership, and it's not so expensive. We can tokenize much cheaper than securitization is possible today. And yet another area that I'm super excited about is, what is share? What do we sell? Like, is a share just this ordinary shares that we know? And then on the other side, there is a utility token and payment token, or there is a mixture, or we will see the new definition of share. Like, you probably heard about this exchange. I guess it's even with you guys in US, INX or something, right? They're issuing a token that is kind of security. It has the features of Binance token, so it's kind of like you can pay their fees with a token, but it also pays dividends. Like, what is this? It's absolutely new instrument. And we need a trading venues for those new instruments, right? Do you agree?
Yeah. No, I do agree that there's kind of new financial instruments, as you said, that are being created that don't have pre-existing correlates. One other thing I want to ask you about was, so why do you think, obviously you explained your pitch to Switzerland about how this was kind of the wave of the future and this was the new technology. But do you have any other theories about why Switzerland has been so open to the crypto industry?
Well, I think those are historic reasons, right? So basically, if you look back 100 years, so during the First, Second World War, because Switzerland was always a politically neutral country, not being involved in armed conflicts and wars, so all the wealth came here, for safety. And even after the Second World War, this country saw an incredible increase in assets pulling into this country as a safe haven, right? And then basically what happened in 2008, that US cracked down on UBS, and, basically asking UBS to reveal all US customers' data, and that was actually against the banking secrecy, which was part of banking law for 200 years, right? So, it was very dramatic development here in this country. They had to abandon banking secrecy. And with that, the core business, wealth management, I mean, there is no growth, right? Like the growth is in Asia. Here we have like 2-3%. And the question is like, well, that was a competitive advantage, this banking secrecy, the safety. And if this goes away, what is going to substitute this competitive advantage? And I think it's very obvious answer that yes, it's technology. We want to establish ourselves as a place where innovative businesses and financial services, new capital market infrastructure is being built. Of course, that's the only source of growth in this industry, right? Does it make sense?
Yeah, and one thing that interests me is so far a lot of people say that Zug has been the center of all these different crypto companies and foundations. And I mean, we see, just where the foundations are based and stuff. But obviously now we have the Libra Association, which will be based in Geneva. It's a little bit far from Zug and seems to be culturally different because Zug is German speaking and Geneva is French speaking. I'm not Swiss. I have no idea how much that stuff matters. But I just wondered, do you think that means that Libra will have kind of like a different experience, or will that have any kind of effect on the development of crypto going forward or in the development of Libra, since they're going to be kind of separated away from where Crypto Valley has historically been?
I think that doesn't matter. The country is so small. You get on the train and in 3 hours you're in Geneva, right? Everything is very small here. And Geneva has an advantage. It's been always a place for non-governmental organization, for UNESCO, World Trade Organization, all those guys are there, right? So if you want to position this project as a, this global, supranational entity, then Geneva is absolutely the right place to be. In terms of regulation, it's still FINMA. It doesn't matter, right? So they are working with FINMA. Facebook reached out to them in terms of applications. It was actually just yesterday that FINMA released the guidelines about stablecoins, right? And they dedicate the whole page to kind of Libra, the stablecoin of Facebook.
And what did you think?
That's great.
What did you have any thoughts?
Amazing. I think it's amazing. It's absolutely the right place to do it. Not just being a little bit fuzzy away from US, but also because Switzerland still has very solid privacy data protection rules, right? Which data is shared with whom and so on. And I think a lot of people will feel much better about Libra, knowing that it's not US supervised, or at least feeling that way, right? I don't know. I cannot say, how much it will be possible to move away from US supervision and from Big Brother watching all your transactions. I cannot speculate about this one, but I think it's a very good, at least try to get away.
But one thing that was interesting was, so obviously FINMA did release this guidance on the stable coins and address Libra, but then very next day, France said it was going to block Libra. So do you have a take on why that is, and how, why they're not kind of sort of waiting to see how things play out?
Well, I think it's, this is the biggest difficulty with Facebook project, that there are a lot of politics, right? So this can be almost like, political move, like, does France want to be closer to regulation and what regulators say in US, and distance itself from the whole Swiss crypto? There are so many things, under the water that we don't even perceive, right? But I don't think this matters, even look, it's almost the same as with Bitcoin, right? How does it matter that Chinese ban it or one country bans it? I think the vision is so big, and with those 2.5 billion or this crazy number what they have in users, right? And actually people need it. People want to transact in easy, efficient way outside of the banking system, right? And I think Libra is going to be super success. It will take time, right? It will take time them also to get here through the Swiss regulation, right? But the vision is big, the users is there, the funding is there. Like, if you made it with Xapo with 40 million being funded, with that, and also being super new, and everybody said, no, this is not going to happen. Facebook is going to make it anyway. I'm actually quite positive on this one.
Huh. Okay, well, we'll leave it on a positive note. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Where can people learn more about you and SmartValor?
Well, on our website, it's smartvalor.com. So smart as in smart, and Valor is actually, in Switzerland, is a name for securities, right? So smartvalor.com. Join our crypto exchange today, and you will be the first one to get access to exciting opportunities in the space of security tokens.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks so much for coming on Unchained.
You're welcome, Laura. It was nice to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for joining us today. To learn more about Olga and SmartValor, check out the show notes inside your podcast player. If you're not yet subscribed to my other podcast, Unconfirmed, which is shorter and a bit newsier, be sure to check that out. Also, find out what I think are the top crypto stories each week by signing up for my email newsletter at unchainedpodcast.com. Unchained is produced by me, Laura Shin, with help from Fractal Recording, Anthony Yoon, Daniel Ness, Rich Stroffolino, and Josh Durham. Thanks for listening.